Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and today I've got a movie review for you for A Quiet Place Day 1. This is my first film in the A Quiet Place franchise. Haven't seen parts 1 and 2, so I'm going in fresh as my first entry in the series. So before I get any further in this review, let's talk about the plot. When New York City comes under attack from an alien invasion, a woman and other survivors try to find a way to safety. They soon learn that they must remain absolutely silent as the mysterious creatures are drawn into the slightest sound. Alright, so what was good about A Quiet Place Day 1? The first thing I've got to mention right off the bat is that vibe, that feel that you get from watching Quiet Place film. Again, I haven't seen parts 1 or part 2. I will get to those at some point and review them later on this channel. Would have loved to have seen them before going into this one. However, this movie is a prequel, so I felt like it was okay to jump into this one first. Then I'll tackle parts 1 and 2 later. I'm sure I missed a few Easter eggs here and there that I probably would have caught had I seen the previous films before going into this one. However, I was gripped from start to finish. This film just kept you on the edge of your seat from the beginning of this movie to the end of this movie. Now, the beginning of this movie, we start, of course, this is day 1, so the aliens have not landed on Earth. We haven't been attacked by these monsters just yet, and I'd say about the first 15 or 20 minutes, we're in New York City, laying the groundwork for these characters. We meet Lupita Nyong'o, get to know her character a little bit, understand she's going through cancer treatment at this time, and I thought that was an interesting spin on a character like this. We see her, kind of see where she's coming from, and what I took from it was this was a character that already has experienced an interruption in her life. She's already experienced a big change. So when this great catastrophe happens, she's ready to kind of adjust to the change in life. You know, everybody's plans were altered. This wasn't in anyone's plan. Joseph Quinn later says that in the movie later on when we get to see his character, that this wasn't part of the plan, and cancer was not a part of her plan, and now she's just experiencing something else that definitely wasn't a part of her plan either. And so it was interesting seeing a character react to this world from that perspective. It's not really hit on later in the film. I think it was kind of glossed over. I wish I would have dealt with that a little bit more, but that was really interesting. I thought that was an interesting start for a character in a world like this, so I really dug that. I really like that. So we start in this pre-Quiet Place world, you know, nothing's been affected. We're just going about our daily lives in a New York City of all places. I thought this was a very interesting setting for A Quiet Place. You know, one of the loudest cities in the world. You know, the movie starts saying that New York City gives off about 90 decibels, which is the equivalent of somebody screaming at the top of their lungs. Just the fact that you're in this really loud city, you know, you got emergency vehicles giving off sound, you got people giving off sound, walking across the streets. That just gives you the perfect setting for this tense nature of once the aliens come in, you know it's going to be chaos from start to finish, because this is a city that does not sleep, and now they're having to adjust to being quiet and without sound for the first time in their lives. You know, they've never experienced anything like this. And watching this movie, again, this was the first time I had seen A Quiet Place film in theaters, in just period. And so I was so gripped. You know, nobody in my theater wanted to make a noise. Nobody wanted to do anything to budge in their seat. Everybody was being really quiet about going into their popcorn or taking a drink. It was a tense environment. And I wish I had been there for the first 2 films, but I'm just so happy that I was there for this movie. And I just love the vibe. Again, I love the vibe. I love the feel, the setting that we're in New York City. And I think we're given a great character to go through this conflict, this event with Lupita Nyong'o and her character. And then we meet Joseph Quinn's character later on after all the chaos has happened. I'm not going to spoil the plot, but I want to give a setup here for how we meet his character. There's this huge group that are trying to get through New York City as quiet as possible. There's an evacuation happening on the water for people to get onto some boats to get away from the mainland so they can get away from the aliens. All these people start walking, and then as they're going, something happens, alerts the monsters, and it's just chaos again. And then in the midst of that, we meet Joseph Quinn's character. He meets up with Lupita Nyong'o. The two of them join together for the duration of this film going forward, and it's very interesting seeing their characters back and forth. Lupita Nyong'o really doesn't want anything to do with anyone. She's very much a loner. She's very much on her own, dealing with what she's been going through, dealing with cancer. We learn more about her background with other things that have happened in her life. She's just very isolated, wants to kind of handle the world on her own, doesn't want any outside help. But you have Joseph Quinn here here who's just scared out of his mind, and who wouldn't be in a situation like this? And he is so much on his own, but he doesn't want to live this catastrophe out on his own. He would rather do it with somebody else. This is the only person he's seen that he's met in the midst of all of this, and he is glued to her side. He's with her, kind of to her own annoyance at the beginning. You know, she really doesn't want him to keep following her, to be a part of this journey, but he just keeps insisting. She does realize and does have some empathy, realizes that he's pretty scared, and she's like, okay, well, you can wait out the night with me. Other than that, morning comes, you're on your own. And that really sets up where these two characters are going to be going throughout the rest of the film. So no spoilers from the rest of that point on. I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm not going to get any further into that. But this was a great setting. I loved the dichotomy with the characters we had here, the setting we had here, putting it in New York City, just a city that makes so much noise, having to be as quiet as possible. Because one little sound, stepping on some glass, or the creak of a door, the creak of some boards as you take a step, one little sound will bring them in, and they are quick, fast, speedy. If you've seen this series, you know exactly how they move. From what I know from the previews, they're very true to how they are in the other two films. I know that John Krasinski was not the director of this film, but I also know that he did have input on the script. He was a producer on this film, so he did have input in how this movie was made. Not being the director, but they did consult him, so I'm at least glad that he was involved in that aspect of it. And so it was a great entry. You know, somebody who hasn't seen the series at all, I've never seen a Quiet Place movie. I've always been intrigued to see these movies, but for whatever reason, I've never gotten over to seeing them. But this was the first time I'd been in theaters to see a Quiet Place movie, and I was so happy that I made that decision to get myself to the theater, go see A Quiet Place day one. I did not regret my decision going. I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I was gripped from start to finish. Now, I do have a few little gripes in the movie, a few things I think they could have tightened up and changed. We'll get into that later, so why don't we go ahead and move on to the mixed section. For me, it had to be the fact that I don't think we fully utilized New York City, the city that never sleeps. I don't think we fully utilized the environment that we were in. It really hits you at the beginning when it goes down, but then it feels like it just happens. The event happens, the aliens land, we're hit with that, we have to be as quiet as possible, and there's a few characters that react in a way that you're like, no, just don't say anything, you know, stop shouting, stop acting dumb, stop acting stupid. These aliens are alerted to sound, so you make one little sound and boom, you're dead, and you're probably going to get a lot of other people killed too. That's not my gripe here. I think we should have utilized the city more. That's what the movie starts off with. This is a city that gives off 90 decibels of sound. It's the equivalent to somebody screaming at the top of their lungs. But I don't feel like we truly utilized the setting like we could have in this film. I just wish they would have done a lot more with that, pushed on that a little bit more, made that a bigger element of the movie. It is an element, and it's not that it's not touched upon. I just think they could have gone a lot further with it. That's my main nitpick. You know, it's a mixed part of this. I don't fully hate it, don't fully love it, but I think they could have gone a lot further with this, and I wish they had. I just don't think that the setting was utilized to its fullest potential like it could have been, like I was hoping it would have been, and like I thought it was going to be as it was shown in the trailers. I thought that was really going to be a bigger element to this film, and it really wasn't. It was in some aspects, but I just think they could have gone a lot further. Now, another thing I had an issue with, in as far as the mix section goes, was this is A Quiet Place day one. Now, I wasn't expecting an origin story. I didn't want an origin story. I kind of wanted this mystery of these aliens to be kept a mystery. You know, where do they come from? That aspect of it doesn't really matter. Why are they here? Doesn't really matter. But the fact that this is day one, we have this lead up to what's going to be happening. We know that there's going to be this great catastrophe happening as we get further on into the film. Yes, there are characters that don't know how to interact because this is happening on the very first day. But I feel like it just happens, and then we go right into the action. We go right into the story, right into the journey. Obviously, there's not a lot of talk. You know, it is a quiet place. Be quiet. But I feel like we make that really quick transition into being quiet with some of our characters. Yeah, they probably figured it out pretty quick. I would love to have seen a more cleaner transition of the event happening and then seeing everybody reacting to this on just an immediate scale. There are multiple scenes that touch upon that, but I just wish we would have done a lot more. My main issue with this movie is there was just a lot of potential here. They could have done a lot more with what they were given. At the end of the day, this was a good movie. There's a few elements that just could have pushed a little bit further, made them a little bit more impactful on the story, on the characters. So just a few things I have some minor nitpicks with, but other than that, I don't really have anything else, so let's go ahead and move on to what was bad about this movie. I only have one thing I really, really wish was not part of A Quiet Place day one. There's one scene, I'm not going to get too much into what that is, but it does deal with Joseph Quinn's character. He's searching for something in the middle of the night. He does get stranded on his own for a second. encounters the aliens, and it's a scene that I thought didn't really mean anything. There's a point when him and Lupita Nyong'o's character wind up in a church. He leaves her for a second to go do something, and then he winds up right back with her after the events of this scene. The scene had nothing to do with the plot other than maybe showing more of the terror of what these monsters can do, but other than that, it didn't push the plot forward. It didn't really do anything for the movie on its own. It's the only scene that I thought had nothing to do with the rest of the plot in this movie. It's the only thing I had a major issue with. That scene you could have cut out. It would have made this movie a little shorter, but I think it would have made it a little tighter, a lot tighter, and I wish they would have just gotten rid of that scene completely. It didn't really need to be there in the end. That's the main gripe I've got with it. Other than that, let's just get into my final thoughts on A Quiet Place Day 1. I really like this movie. I thought it was so gripping from start to finish. I've said that before at the beginning when I said I was talking about the stuff I liked about this movie. I just want to reiterate that here. I really like that element of the movie. I love the use of sound. That's another thing I should have touched on in the mix section. I don't think the sound of the film was really pushed on as much as it could have been. That's a great element. You know, it's a quiet place. Sound should be such a heavy element of this film, and I just don't think they really pushed it to its max potential in this movie. I think they could have done a lot more with this. I'm sure they did in the previous Quiet Place films, and I just don't think they really pushed on that element as far as they could have. Wish they would have done more with that in the end. However, I got some minor nitpicks with that. One scene I wish wasn't there, and just some elements I wish they pushed a little bit more forward, but I really enjoyed this. You know, I was on the edge of my seat from beginning to end. I knew what was coming at the beginning of the movie, where we were going to be going. As soon as we get into this catastrophe, this chaos element, from that point on to the end of the movie, was just on the edge of my seat, wanting to know what was going to happen with these characters. I just was hoping that they would make it as safely as possible. At the end of the movie, I was left happy with some of the outcome, a little heartbroken with some of the outcome. So, you know, it did pull on my emotions, and I love it when a movie does that because that means the movie did its job. I really like this movie, and I think you will too. This was my first A Quiet Place experience, so I'm really excited to get into A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2. Can't wait to see those movies, and when I watch those, I will do a review for them on the channel, either on their own or as a double feature video later down the road. If I'm going to give this movie a ranking, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 or a B+ on the letter scale. I really like this movie. Wish they would have pushed on a few more elements, gone a little further with some of the stuff they were setting up here, but at the end of the day, this was a fun ride, a great entry into the Quiet Place universe for me, and for a lot of you that haven't seen this movie, I wasn't really lost at all. There might have been a few Easter eggs that went over my head, but at the end of the day, this was a great experience, a great first-time experience for me. So if you haven't seen any of the Quiet Place movies, go ahead and jump into this one, and you will not be disappointed, I promise you. This was a great time at the theater. I loved every second of it. So guys, let me know what you thought of A Quiet Place Day 1 down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live on this channel. I hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.